I'm about to show you a very powerful reason why you're riding at the wrong RPM. And if I were to tell you that fixing this would be the difference between an engine rebuild and a happy wallet, would you try it? Well, my friend does it and the results speak for themselves. One of his cars is on 200k plus miles and his bike is on 50k plus. But what is it? Well, it was the result of the thing that you're probably ignoring along with 90% of other riders. And not doing this can completely wreck a bike. So what did he do? Well, in this video, we're going to take a look at the reasons you shouldn't be revving your bike too much, but also the reasons you should. Should we really be scared of revving your bike too much? The limiter's there for a reason, right? Let's use it. But what actually is that reason? This topic always reminds me of the day that I drove his classic Mini, which has no limiter. I was told, be careful, otherwise you could cause valve flow. And then you might have to buy me another engine. But what does that even mean? This is when the valve springs aren't strong enough to close the valve when it should. This is caused when the momentum of the fast moving camshaft is too strong for the spring. And therefore the valve doesn't follow the camshaft and close when it should. This can lead to the piston coming in contact with the still open valve. Not good. The collision can result in bent valves and potentially very bad damage to the pistons and other components. So basically, very bad stuff. But nearly all bikes have a limiter. Although the limiter will stop this from happening, what it can't stop is mechanical over-revving. But how does that happen? Well, downshifting to a lower gear at high speeds can cause the engine to rapidly spin beyond its safe RPM limit. Basically, using a gear that is too low for the current speed, aka money shifting. But this is very uncommon for bikes because of their sequential gearbox. So as long as we don't money shift, we're all good to rev the nuts off our bike. Right? But should we? Personally, I spend most of my time at redline because it's fun. But it's important to consider that for some bikes, you won't see the most power there. An engine may have a high redline, but it may produce peak power below that point. And if we know where that peak is, we can shift according to it, allowing us to accelerate just as quick, if not quicker, than pushing it to redline. But what happens if we miss a shift? Should we really be scared of over-revving the engine?
Well, I'm sure you've heard it a million times. Over-revving can significantly reduce the engine's overall longevity.
Is this true? Well, yeah, of course it's true. But it's not anywhere near as bad as the points we're about to look at. But before we look at that, why could over-revving ruin your engine?
Well, the increased RPMs puts additional stress on various components.
For example, this stress can lead to bending or breaking of con rods and the crankshaft. And we don't want to send any rods to the moon.
Higher engine speeds will also result in increased friction and heat.
And we all know engines don't like being too hot. Although having said that, it's also worth considering what bike you're riding, as different engines will have completely different RPM limits. Take my VFR for example. That thing has a red line around 15 to 16,000 RPM. Whereas, silly comparison here, our CG125 has a limiter around 10,000. There's many different reasons for this, but it all comes down to the engine's components. The engines with higher RPM limits will often have much stronger and much lighter components, specifically designed to handle the increased stresses associated with higher engine speeds. More specifically, the valve train. The most common systems are push rod and overhead cam systems. A push rod system will typically have longer and heavier components, meaning more weight to be accelerated and decelerated during each engine cycle, which isn't what you want if you want to do 17,000 RPM. Overhead cam systems, however, will typically have much lighter components, which gives a lower moving mass and inertia, allowing for quicker valve movements at higher RPMs. Of course, the valve train isn't the only thing that contributes to the engine's RPM. The number of cylinders and also their layout will also have a huge impact. So we've established that a higher RPM will accelerate wear on components. But are there any benefits to it? And if so, do they outweigh the negatives? Well, the next one we're going to look at is critical, and yet so many people get it wrong. First, let's take a look at carbon buildup. The occurrence of incomplete combustion leads to the accumulation of carbon buildup on internal engine components. This buildup starts to erode at your compression ratio, but more importantly, can have severe consequences. So, how do we avoid this? Well, that's where the benefit to a higher RPM comes in.
Higher engine speeds result in higher temperatures and more efficient combustion.
Improved engine efficiency reduces carbon buildup because it leaves fewer unburnt fuel particles that contribute to deposits. It also has a cleaning effect. The increased temperature can help to burn off carbon deposits to some extent. This paired with the increased airflow, well, it can clean out your engine. But carbon buildup isn't even the worst of it. Giving it the beans at a very low RPM can result in engine lugging. This is where the engine is struggling to produce sufficient power at low RPMs, resulting in increased stresses on internal engine components. This is because you have caused a gearing disadvantage, which puts your engine at a disadvantage. Basically because you're making it do more work than it can. So there you have it. There are some benefits to riding at a higher RPM, although you might use more fuel. But I think in conclusion, you gain a sense of where your engine is happy. And personally, I try to keep it in that range. Low load, lower engine speed. Higher load, higher engine speed. If you know how to listen, your engine will speak to you. RPM isn't the only thing that you might be doing wrong. Watch this, you might be braking wrong.